Michael Portillo is still with me in the studio. Michael, let's talk about the threat from the Lib Dems, because I felt, particularly in the locals, they had a little bit of a resurgence, but previously to that, they'd been very anonymous. Obviously, they faced almost total wipeout in 2019. The days of Cleggmania well and truly over post-coalition. And now I think the forecasting suggests that they may win 39 to 40 seats. So although Sir Ed Davey isn't the most charismatic leader and he's not particularly visible, he's certainly not been visible on GB News. We've asked him since I started this show to come on, and he never has. However, the Lib Dems could do OK.
Yeah, I entirely agree with that. I mean, I did not find anything that Ed Davey said there very compelling. I thought it lacked clarity and edge. I don't think he's going to be a very important figure during the election campaign. But in the end, if there are a lot of people who are determined to get rid of the Tories, and that seems to be, the mood, at least in some places, then they will engage in tactical voting.
Yes.
And so people who might want to vote Labour will see in seats where the Liberal Democrats are second and have a good chance, southeast of England and so on down into the West Country, the Labour vote will switch. This is what happened to me, by the way. I had Liberal Democrats switch to vote for Labour,
yes.
Got rid of me. So I think voters will be doing that. So I think it's perfectly plausible for the Liberal Democrats to have a very low-profile, ineffective campaign under a man I regard as an ineffective leader, and yet nonetheless to do quite well.
Yeah. Also, do you think that there may be the prospect of some kind of Lib-Lab pact?
I would doubt it at national level, but at local level for sure.
Yeah.
And it's not even a pact. It's just, if you're organising the Labour candidate in a seat where the Liberal Democrats are strong second to the Conservatives, you just take your foot off the pedal and you allow your volunteers to go off to other seats, and you don't try very hard with your leaflets and so on and so on. And the effect is therefore to raise the profile of the other campaign.
I agree he's not convincing, although he probably does make a good point about the whole sewage thing, which has really angered people, particularly in the blue wall. I mean, this idea that Lib Dems, I don't necessarily like their overall strategy, but at a local level, they're good at filling potholes and getting the bins out. They care about the rivers. That could be quite an attractive offering to Tories that are kind of not particularly convinced by Sunak.
It could. And also, he was talking there about reforming the system. But I would not agree with him about how to reform the system. But I'm slightly impatient with the two main parties, neither of which seems to think the system needs reforming.
No.
And I think it jolly well does. But as I say, my solution would not be Ed Davey, so it would be different.
OK, let's also talk about the independent threat to Labour. And let's focus on Jeremy Corbyn, obviously once the party leader, now an independent who's standing against Labour in Islington North. This is what he had to say in his campaign launch video.
The Prime Minister is. I'll be holding them to account. Holding them to account on child poverty, holding them to account on hunger, holding them to account on health, on jobs, on the environment, on global issues of peace and justice. That is what an MP should do. And that is what I've done and will do. And I hope that those people that have always supported Labour, and indeed are members of the Labour Party, will understand that I'm here to represent and serve the people of Islington North on the same principles I've always had as the MP for this area.
So I was reading Jeremy Corbyn's sort of statement in the week, and then he had listed all of his priorities. And interestingly, I just noted it, he had put mosques ahead of churches. And then I thought, well, clearly this is appeal not just to the sort of more far left elements of Labour support base, but also to the Muslim vote. You've then got George Galloway's Workers' Party fielding candidates that, again, Ian Duncan Smith told me the other day that he thinks that a Workers' Party candidate is going to stand in Chingford and Woodford Green. He's on a very small majority there. And actually, if it splits the Labour vote, that could be a good thing for some Tories in London. What do you think is the extent of the threat to Labour from some of these independents?
Well, from Corbyn, I would think quite a small threat. It's a very interesting case because he's been a member for decades and he's got a huge majority. But my guess would be that nonetheless, most people in the constituency who vote Labour will vote Labour.
Yes.
Because actually they're interested in getting rid of the Tories. And voting for Jeremy Corbyn threatens to split the vote. So
Although he's been there for decades. He's got a lot of local support there.
I would guess he'll do very, very well. But he's got such a big majority that Labour can lose a great chunk of that majority
Yes.
and still hold the seat.
We're not going to have a situation where suddenly, in some bizarre turn of fate, the Conservatives rise to victory in Islington North.
I don't see that happening. On the broader point, I think the Labour Party is going to lose quite a lot of votes from Muslim voters that otherwise it would have got. I think there's the possibility over time, not just during this general election, but later, of there being a sectarian party. George Galloway's party is the embryo of that. But for this election, I think Keir Starmer has decided that he can probably win without having to change his policies unduly on Gaza and Israel to try and get back the Muslim vote. I think he is comfortable enough that he thinks he can win, even though he's going to lose quite a lot of votes and maybe even a couple of seats.
And this is why he's flip-flopping all over the place when it comes to him being... His launch video when he ran for the Labour leadership in 2020 was this unashamed sort of socialist offering. We now have him being more moderate, pretending to be a Blairite. Is this why he's doing this whole, I'm a Labour everyman, because he wants to cover all these bases?
Yes, although I think that's slightly unfair to him. I mean, he clearly has moved to the right. You know, whether you believe in the sincerity, he's clearly moved to the right and to the centre. And actually, I've said it a couple of times before, I think he's been quite firm and quite bold on the Gaza position, even though it's been very difficult for him within the Labour Party and its risk losing Muslim votes. So I would give him some credit for that. I mean, as a general point, I think it's very difficult to know who Starmer is, because the Starmer of 4 or 5 years ago was extraordinarily different from the one we have today. And who knows what the one of 4 or 5 years' time will be. I
know, but my argument, and I made it in my Telegraph column this weekend, you know, once a socialist, always a socialist. The idea that he's a Blairite, when actually he seems to be quite a staunchly left-wing eco-warrior, remains to be seen.
That does remain to be seen. And then, of course, you have to compare that with a Rishi Sunak who thinks the state should be extended.
Well, indeed so. There are contradictions at play all over the place. Michael Portillo, thank you so much for joining us on your birthday.